After my husband David passed away, I did something I hadn't done in 40 years. I made a major decision entirely on my own. I bought a new car, a sleek silver sedan that smelled of promise and fresh upholstery. It was more than just a vehicle. It was my declaration of independence, a vessel meant to carry me into the uncharted territory of a life without him. The very next day, my son Michael came over. He didn't knock. He just walked in, his face a cold, unfamiliar mask. He found me in the kitchen, humming to a tune on the radio, a fragile bubble of peace I'd managed to create. He strode directly to the counter where the shiny new keys lay, a stark contrast to the worn wood. He scooped them up, his fingers closing around them with a chilling finality. "You don't need this," he told me, his voice stripped of all the warmth I'd known for his entire life. The coldness in his eyes was a stranger's gaze. "I'm driving out of state tomorrow with Jessica's family," he continued, as if discussing the weather. "Our car's on the fritz. I can drop you off at the retirement community on the way." I was stunned. The air left my lungs in a silent gasp. My own son, the tiny baby I had held against my heart, the little boy whose scraped knees I had kissed, the young man I had celebrated and worried over, had just stripped me of my future. He had decided with his wife that my life, my home, my choices were no longer my own. He was dismissing me. So as he walked out my door, climbed into my car, my symbol of a new beginning, and drove away, a cold, crystalline fury began to form where my heart had just been shattered. I picked up my phone, my hands steady despite the tremor in my soul, and sent him a text message. Just 3 words. Check the glove compartment. What he found in there, nestled amongst the owner's manual and a packet of tissues, made him slam on the brakes so hard the tires screamed against the asphalt. What he found in there made him understand, with a sudden gut-wrenching clarity, that he had just made the worst mistake of his entire life. But for you to understand the weight of those 3 words, for you to truly grasp why a mother would set such a perfect, inescapable trap for her own son, I need to tell you the whole story. I need to take you back to the beginning. My name is Evelyn Miller, and I am 65 years old. Until 3 months ago, I was one half of a whole. David and I had been married for 40 years. 40 years of weaving our lives together into a single beautiful tapestry. 40 years of shared laughter that echoed in the walls of our home, of quiet struggles faced shoulder to shoulder, of building a family and a life from scratch. David was a good man, a hard-working man, the kind of man built from integrity and quiet strength, a model they just don't seem to make anymore. When the doctor gave us the diagnosis, we faced it together. When the treatments failed, we held each other through the long, dark nights. And when he finally drew his last breath, his hand in mine, I felt the world stop turning on its axis. The silence he left behind was a physical entity, a deafening roar that consumed everything. Our house, once a sanctuary of warmth and love, became a mausoleum of memories. Every corner held a ghost. His coffee mug, with a small chip on the rim that he refused to throw away, sat by the sink. His favorite armchair in the living room still bore the faint impression of his body. The faint, comforting scent of his Old Spice cologne lingered in the bathroom, a cruel daily reminder of what I had lost. And I was adrift in the middle of it all, a lone sailor on a vast empty sea with no idea which way to steer the rest of my life. The first few days were a blur of impenetrable fog. I didn't want to get out of bed. The thought of food was nauseating. The ringing phone went unanswered. I wanted to pull the world over my head like a blanket and simply cease to exist. But one morning, perhaps a week after the funeral, a sliver of sunlight pierced through the drawn curtains and landed on a photograph on my bedside table. It was of David and me, taken on a beach vacation years ago. We were squinting into the sun, our faces crinkled with laughter, full of life and a future we thought was endless. As I stared at his smiling face, I heard his voice in my head, as clear and steady as if he were standing right behind me. "Evelyn," he would always say, his hand covering mine, "as long as there is air in your lungs, there is a reason to keep going. Don't you dare sit still and let life pass you by. Go out and live it. Live it for both of us." And he was right. He always was. That voice, that memory, was the spark I needed. A decision formed in the depths of my grief, solid and unwavering. I was going to start over. I refused to let this house become my tomb, to spend my remaining years living among ghosts and what-ifs. I was going to honor David's memory by living, truly and fully. And for that, I needed to be able to move. I needed freedom. I needed a car. For all our years of marriage, we'd driven the same old vehicle, a sturdy but weary gray sedan that David, with his mechanical ingenuity and endless patience, had kept running long past its expiration date. It was a testament to his character, practical, reliable, and uncomplaining. But that car, it seemed, had died with him. It broke down a week after the funeral, coughing and sputtering to a final, definitive stop in the grocery store parking lot. The mechanic, a kind man with grease-stained hands, gave me the verdict with a sympathetic look. Fixing it, he said, would cost more than the car was worth. It was time to let it go. So, with the life insurance money, a sum David had diligently paid into for decades to ensure I'd be taken care of, and the savings we had carefully put away together, I decided to buy myself a new car. Not something fancy or ostentatious, just something reliable, something that was mine, something that would represent this new, terrifying, and uncertain chapter of my life. I went to the dealership on a Tuesday morning. The air inside smelled of polish and possibility. The salesman, a polite young man named Stephen, didn't treat me like a confused old woman. He listened patiently as I explained what I was looking for. He showed me several models, and then I saw it, a silver sedan gleaming under the bright showroom lights. It was perfect, compact, easy to drive, and equipped with all the modern safety features I needed. I slid into the driver's seat, the new car smell enveloping me, and gripped the steering wheel. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, a flicker of hope. Stephen patiently explained everything to me, from the anti-lock braking system to the side curtain airbags and the details of the warranty. He wasn't pushy. He was informative and respectful. When he told me the price, $8,500, I knew I could afford it. I had the money. It was mine. I had earned it with every meal I'd cooked, every shift I'd worked when Michael was young, with every penny David and I had saved while dreaming of a comfortable future. A future he would no longer see, but one that I was now determined to live. I signed the papers that same day. The car was registered in my name. Only my name, Evelyn Miller, sole owner. The words on the pink slip felt monumental. As I drove out of the dealership, the engine purring softly, the smell of fresh upholstery a comforting cocoon, tears began to stream down my face. They were tears of joy and sorrow inextricably mixed. Joy for taking this monumental step forward, for reclaiming a piece of my life. Sadness, because David wasn't in the passenger seat beside me, his hand on my knee, telling me how proud he was. But as I drove home, the afternoon sun warming my face through the windshield, I knew he would be. I knew this was exactly what he would have wanted me to do. I arrived home and parked the car in the driveway. For a long moment, I just sat there, looking at it. It was beautiful. It was mine. It was my new beginning. I took the keys, their metallic weight unfamiliar but satisfying in my palm, and went inside. I placed them on the kitchen table, a small monument to my own resilience. Then I picked up the phone and called my son, Michael, eager to share my news. I wanted to share this moment of fragile victory with him. I wanted him to know that his mother was going to be okay, that I was being strong, that I was honoring his father's memory in the best way I knew how, by choosing life. Michael didn't answer. His voicemail kicked in. "Honey, it's Mom," I said, my voice bright with excitement. "I did something today. I bought a new car. I'm so excited. Come by when you can so you can see it. I love you." I hung up, my heart light, filled with the naive hope that he would be happy for me, that he would understand how much this simple act of buying a car meant. I had no idea that my world was about to be turned upside down. I had no idea that my own son was about to betray me in the most cruel and calculated way imaginable. The next day, I woke up early. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky in hues of lavender and rose, and I was already in the kitchen, the aroma of brewing coffee filling the air. I had plans. For the first time in months, I had a schedule. I wanted to go to the grocery store, then swing by my friend Sarah's house to show her the car. And maybe, if I felt brave enough, I'd drive to the cemetery to visit David and tell him all about it. I know it sounds silly, talking to someone who's no longer there, but it made me feel closer to him. It made the silence a little less crushing. I was finishing my second cup of coffee, feeling a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in what seemed like an eternity, when I heard a car pull up outside. I glanced out the kitchen window and saw Michael's familiar blue SUV. My heart did a little leap of joy. He had come. He had gotten my message and come to see me, to see my new car, to share this moment with me. I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile, and hurried toward the front door. But when I opened it, that smile froze on my face, cracking like thin ice. Michael wasn't alone. Standing beside him was Jessica, his wife. Neither of them was smiling. Their faces were set in grim, determined lines. There was an unnerving intensity in the way they looked at me, a look that made me feel less like a mother and more like a problem they had come to solve. "Hi, honey," I said, my voice betraying a slight tremor as I tried to maintain a cheerful tone. "Jessica, what a surprise to see you both so early. Come in, come in. I just made coffee." Michael didn't even respond to my greeting. He brushed past me without a word, his shoulders rigid, and walked straight into the house, his determined steps echoing on the hardwood floor as he headed for the kitchen. Jessica followed him, giving me a quick, unreadable glance before averting her eyes. I closed the door slowly, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. The fragile joy I had felt moments before evaporated, replaced by a cold, prickling unease. Something was very, very wrong. In the kitchen, Michael was standing in front of the table, his gaze fixed on the keys to my new car. He picked them up, weighing them in his hand as if assessing their value, their power. "Mom," he finally said, his voice flat, still refusing to meet my eyes. "I need to talk to you." I crossed my arms over my chest, a subconscious defensive gesture, trying to ignore the alarm bells that were now screaming in my head. "Sure, honey. What is it? Is everything all right?" He exchanged a brief, significant look with Jessica. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, as if granting him permission to proceed. And then Michael spoke, the words dropping like stones into the quiet kitchen. "Mom, I heard you bought a car. A new car." "Yes," I replied, my voice a little too bright, a desperate attempt to steer the conversation back to happy territory. "That's why I called you yesterday. I wanted you to come see it. It's beautiful, Michael, and it makes me feel so free." "So you don't need it," he interrupted, the finality in his tone hitting me like a physical blow. The air crackled with tension. I stared at him, my mind struggling to process his words. "What?" I whispered. Michael finally lifted his head and looked me straight in the eyes. The coldness there was shocking. "You don't need a car, Mom. Not at your age. Your reflexes aren't what they used to be. It's dangerous. And besides," he continued, his voice laced with a condescending practicality, "it's an unnecessary expense. The maintenance, the insurance, the gas. What for?" I felt as if he had slapped me across the face. "Michael, I drive perfectly fine. My license is current. I passed all the tests with flying colors. And besides, it is my money. It was my decision." "Ah," he shook his head slowly, a look of profound impatience on his face, as if he were dealing with a stubborn, irrational child. "Mom, this isn't about that. It's about being practical. Look, Jessica and I have been talking. Tomorrow, we're traveling with her parents. It's a family trip we've been planning for months, and our car is having engine trouble. Yours is new. It's perfect for the trip." A cold realization began to dawn. "Wait," I said, holding up a hand. "Are you telling me you came? Here to ask to borrow my car?" Michael let out a short, humorless laugh. "I didn't come to ask you for anything, Mom. I came to tell you I'm going to use it." And before I could process what was happening, before I could summon a single word of protest, his hand closed tightly around the keys. "No!" I shouted, the word tearing from my throat. "Michael, those are my keys! It's my car!" But he was already walking toward the door, Jessica trailing silently in his wake like a shadow. I scrambled after them, my heart pounding in my chest. "Michael, stop! You cannot do this! Give me back my keys!" He paused at the threshold and turned to look at me, and what I saw in his eyes broke my heart into a million pieces. There was no love there. There was no respect. There was only impatience and an emotion that looked terrifyingly like contempt. "Mom, enough with the drama," he said, his voice so cold and detached it didn't sound like it belonged to my son. "You don't need this car. You don't need any of this." He gestured vaguely around the house. "You're living alone in this huge house, clinging to memories. It's not healthy." What are you saying?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Jessica and I have been talking," Michael continued, his voice relentless, "and we think it would be better for you to consider moving to a more appropriate place, a retirement community. There are some very good ones in the area. You'd be looked after, you'd have company, you wouldn't have to worry about a thing. In fact, when we get back from the trip, we can go look at some. I can even drop you off at one on the way out of town tomorrow." The world stopped. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to fade away. My son's words echoed in the cavern of my skull, but my mind refused to accept them. A retirement community. He was telling me to go to a retirement community, to leave my home, the place where I had built a life with his father, the repository of all my precious memories. To be put away, to become a burden for others to manage. "Michael," I said, my voice trembling uncontrollably, "I don't need a retirement community. I am perfectly fine here. This is my home." He let out a heavy, exasperated sigh, as if my resistance was just another tiresome obstacle in his path. "Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be. We're taking the car. We'll be gone for a week. When we get back, we'll talk calmly about your situation." And with that, he turned and walked out of the house. Jessica followed him without a single word, without even a backward glance. I ran after them, my bare feet cold on the concrete porch. "Michael, no, please, that car is mine. I bought it with my money. You can't just take it." But he was already opening the door to my new car, my silver car, my symbol of freedom. "Michael, I'm begging you," I cried, tears of disbelief and agony starting to roll down my cheeks. "Don't do this to me. I'm your mother." He paused for a fleeting second, his hand on the door handle. For that one tiny fraction of a moment, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, doubt, maybe even shame. I thought he was going to reconsider, that he would remember who I was, that he would remember everything I had ever done for him. But then the moment passed. His face hardened again. He got into the car, started the engine, and without another look, he drove away. He just left, with Jessica in the passenger seat, with my keys, with my car, with my dignity. I stood there, a lone figure in the middle of my own driveway, watching my silver car disappear down the street until it was just a glint of light in the distance. The tears were falling freely now, hot and bitter. My whole body was trembling from shock and a profound, bone-deep sorrow. I couldn't believe what had just happened. My own son had robbed me. He had humiliated me. He had declared me irrelevant. I stumbled back into the house, the silence inside now feeling malevolent. I closed the door and collapsed onto the sofa in the living room. And there, surrounded by the ghosts of a life that no longer existed, I cried. I cried for the car. I cried for the betrayal. But most of all, I cried for the son I had just lost forever. I don't know how long I sat on that sofa, lost in a storm of grief. It could have been minutes. It could have been hours. Time had dissolved into a meaningless, painful haze. All I felt was a deep, searing pain in my chest, as if something vital inside me had been fractured beyond repair. And perhaps it had. The sacred, unconditional trust a mother holds for her child had been shattered. But then, in the midst of that emotional darkness, something shifted. The flood of tears subsided. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, my skin raw and tight, and I felt a new emotion begin to grow in my chest, pushing aside the pain. It wasn't sadness, it wasn't desperation, it was rage. a cold, quiet, calculated rage that began to crystallize into something hard and sharp. Because as I sat there, replaying the morning's horror in my mind, I remembered something important, something Michael didn't know, something that was going to change everything. I was not a foolish old woman. I had lived for 65 years. I had raised a son practically on my own, while David worked double shifts to keep us afloat. I had managed a home, a budget, an entire life with quiet competence. And through all those years, I had learned a fundamental lesson. You always have to be prepared for the worst. You always have to have a backup plan. When I bought that car, I didn't just sign the papers and drive home in a cloud of naive happiness. No, I had been careful. I had been smart, because even though I wanted to believe my son was a good man, even though I desperately wanted to think he would never hurt me, I had seen the signs. Small, insidious signs that I had tried to ignore because acknowledging them was too painful. The way Jessica's eyes would sweep over my house, a speculative gleam in them, as if she were mentally calculating its market value. The way Michael would casually ask about his father's life insurance, about my savings, about my long-term plans. Comments that seemed innocuous at the time, but now, in the harsh light of his betrayal, felt like reconnaissance missions. So after buying the car, after the initial joy had settled, I had done something else. Something that at the time seemed like an overreaction, almost paranoia, but now felt like a stroke of genius. I had paid a visit to Robert. Robert had been David's best friend for 30 years. He was a lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense man with a deep well of kindness behind his professional demeanor. When I sat in his office and told him I'd bought a new car and had certain concerns about my son, he didn't judge me. He didn't tell me I was being paranoid. He just listened, his expression serious and attentive. "Evelyn," he had told me that day, his hand steepled on his dark wood desk, "if you have doubts, it's better to be prepared. Prevention isn't distrust, it's intelligence." And then he helped me. He helped me forge an arsenal. He helped me prepare a series of legal documents that protected my interests. Documents that made it unequivocally clear who owned that car, and documents that established severe, unavoidable consequences for anyone who tried to take what was mine. Robert had prepared a letter, a notarized letter bearing his official seal and a signature that carried the full weight of the law. In that letter, everything was spelled out in cold, hard, legal terms. It stated that the silver sedan was registered solely in my name, Evelyn Miller. It clarified that anyone who took it without my explicit, written permission would be committing a felony, grand theft auto. And it affirmed that I, as the sole owner, had every right to press criminal charges. Furthermore, Robert had attached certified copies of the car's title, the vehicle registration, and my current driver's license, all irrefutable proof that I was legally and mentally competent to own and operate that vehicle. But that wasn't all. Robert also helped me prepare another document, one that felt like twisting a knife in my own heart to sign, but that I knew was necessary. A modification to my will. In the original will, which David and I had drawn up years ago, Michael was the sole heir. The house, the savings, the memories, everything was going to be for him. But after seeing the warning signs, after feeling that cold knot in my stomach every time Jessica brought up money, I had made a change. A radical change. In the new, legally binding codicil to my will, I completely and utterly removed Michael as a beneficiary. It wasn't a punishment, I had explained to Robert, my voice thick with unshed tears. It was a protection. If something were to happen to me, I could not bear the thought of Jessica and a version of my son I no longer recognized benefiting from my death. I wanted my assets, my life's work with David, to go to charities, organizations that helped senior citizens fight against elder abuse, animal shelters, places that would do real good in the world. Robert included a certified copy of that new will in the package. And finally, we prepared one more thing, a sworn declaration, signed by me and notarized by Robert, in which I clearly stated that I was in full possession of my mental faculties, that I was not being coerced or manipulated by any party, and that any attempt to declare me incompetent or force me into a retirement community against my express will would be considered a criminal act of elder abuse, and would be challenged with the full force of the law. To bolster this, Robert had also attached the results of a recent medical examination, which demonstrated I was in perfect physical and mental health. All of that entire legal arsenal, I had placed into a single manila envelope. And that envelope, I had put in the glove compartment of my new car the very day I brought it home, the day before Michael came to steal it. At that moment, when I slid it into the dark space, a part of me had prayed I would never need it. A part of me had hoped I was wrong about my son. But another part of me, the pragmatic, world-weary part that had learned to be cautious, knew it was the right decision. Now, sitting on my sofa, my eyes swollen from crying, I remembered all of that, and a bitter, triumphant smile touched my lips. Michael thought I was a silly, sentimental old woman. He thought he could just take what he wanted, and I would do nothing. He thought I was weak, easily manipulated, that I had already given up on life. But he was very, very wrong. I pushed myself up from the sofa. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of cold water, drinking it slowly, feeling the icy rage solidify into steely determination. I picked up my cell phone from the table. I stared at it for a long moment. I knew Michael must be on the highway by now, probably well out of the city. He and Jessica were likely heading to her parents' house, who lived in another state, several hours away. They were probably laughing, congratulating themselves on how they had secured a brand new car for their trip, free of charge. Jessica was probably telling Michael how easy it had been, how pathetic his mother was, how they would soon have control of everything. I opened the messaging application and found Michael's contact. My fingers trembled slightly as they hovered over the screen, not from fear or sadness, but from a potent, surging anticipation. Because I knew exactly what I was about to do. I knew the devastating effect it was going to have. And although a small maternal part of me grieved for what was coming, the larger part of me, the part that had been so profoundly disrespected, knew it was necessary. I typed 3 words. Just 3 simple, direct words, but they were loaded with a weight that Michael could not yet possibly imagine. Check the glove compartment. That was all. No explanations, no threats, no emotional pleas, just those 3 words. Check the glove compartment. I pressed send. The message left my phone. I saw the small check mark indicate it was delivered, then turn blue to show it had been read. I imagined Michael on the highway, my car gliding smoothly beneath him, hearing the notification ping from his phone. I imagined him glancing at the screen, perhaps with Jessica asking who it was. I imagined him reading that short, cryptic message and feeling a flicker of confusion. Check the glove compartment? What on earth could his mother mean by that? I sat down at the kitchen table, my phone in my hand, and I waited. My heart was beating fast, but it was a steady, rhythmic thrum. There was no turning back now. The first stone had been cast. And soon, very soon, Michael was going to understand that he had catastrophically underestimated his mother. That the woman who had given him life, who had raised him with endless love and sacrifice, was also a woman who knew how to defend herself. A woman who would not allow anyone, not even her own son, to trample all over her. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The silence in the house was absolute. Then my phone vibrated, shattering the quiet. It was Michael. He was calling. I looked at his name on the screen and deliberately pressed the ignore button. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. A second later, he called again. Ignored. A third time. Ignored. 5 calls in a row, each one met with silence on my end. I wanted him to feel what I had felt that morning. The helplessness, the dawning panic, the slow, sickening realization that control of the situation had been completely wrested from his hands. Finally, he stopped calling, and a text message arrived. Mom, what is this? What does this envelope mean? Call me, please. I didn't respond. A minute later, another message. Mom, this is all a huge mistake. We can talk about this. Please answer the phone. I didn't respond to that one either. And then came the message I had been waiting for. The message that confirmed he had read everything, that he had seen the documents, that the full, terrifying magnitude of his actions had finally crashed down upon him. The message read, Mom, please don't do this. It was a mistake. I'm so sorry. We can fix this. Do not call the police, please. I read those words over and over. I could feel the raw panic bleeding through the screen, the desperation, the abject fear. And although a part of me, that maternal part that never completely dies, felt a sharp pang of pain seeing my son so terrified. The other part, the part that had been so cruelly betrayed and humiliated, felt a grim satisfaction, because now he knew. Now he understood that actions have consequences. I let another 10 minutes crawl by before responding. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted every second of agonizing silence to be a stark reminder of what he had done. Finally, I typed a short, clear directive. Return the car to my house, now. His reply was immediate. I'm 3 hours away. I'm turning around right now. I'll be there as soon as I can. I promise, Mom. I placed the phone on the table and leaned back in my chair. A strange, complex feeling washed over me. It wasn't joy. It couldn't be joy when it involved the fracturing of my relationship with my own son. But it was something akin to justice, a sense of vindication. I had spent my entire life being gentle, being understanding, being the perfect mother who always forgave everything. And it had led me here to be treated like a nuisance, a disposable object. I went to my room and looked at my reflection in the mirror. I saw a 65-year-old woman with threads of silver in her hair, with wrinkles etched around her eyes from years of laughter and tears, with hands that had worked hard her whole life. But today, I saw something else in those eyes. I saw strength. I saw dignity. I saw a woman who was not going to give up. David had always told me I was stronger than I gave myself credit for. I wished he could see me now. I wished he could see his wife standing up for herself. I think he would have been proud. I changed my clothes. I put on a dark green dress, one David had given me for an anniversary years ago. It made me feel elegant and composed. I brushed my hair and put on a touch of lipstick. If I was going to have this confrontation with my son, I was going to face it with my head held high. I would not be the broken, weeping woman he had left on the sofa. I would be the woman who had seized back control of her own life. While I waited, I called Robert. He needed to know what was happening. He answered on the second ring. "Evelyn," he said, his voice calm and professional. "What can I do for you?" "Robert, it happened," I told him, my own voice steady. "My son took the car. He found the documents. He's on his way back now." There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then I heard him let out a long, weary sigh. "I'm sorry you were right, Evelyn. Nobody ever wants to be right about something like this." "I know," I replied. "But now I need to know what comes next." Robert patiently explained my options. Technically, Michael had committed a felony. Even though he was my son, family ties didn't negate the law. I had every right to file a police report and press charges. But I also had the right not to. The decision, he stressed, was entirely mine. The crucial thing was that now Michael knew I held that power. I had the tools to hold him accountable. "I want to talk to him first," I told Robert. "But I want you to be available by phone just in case." "Of course," he replied without hesitation. "I'll have the phone in my hand. Call me for anything. And Evelyn," he added, his voice softening just before he hung up, "you are a brave woman. Don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise." His words were a balm to my wounded spirit. "Thank you, Robert. Thank you for everything." I hung up and looked at the clock. Michael had said he was 3 hours away. That meant he would arrive around 5 o'clock. It was barely 2. I had time. Time to prepare myself mentally. Time to decide exactly what I was going to say. Time to steel my resolve. I went to the kitchen and made myself some tea, not because I wanted it, but because the simple ritual of boiling water and steeping a bag gave my hands something to do. As I waited, my mind drifted back through the years, through a lifetime of sacrifices made for Michael. The sleepless nights when he was a colicky baby, the countless times I had put his needs, his wants, before my own. The summers I'd worked 2 jobs to pay for the expensive music lessons he'd begged for, only to abandon them a year later. The times I had defended his poor choices to others because he was my son, and that's what mothers did. And I thought about Jessica. I thought about how she had entered our lives 5 years ago, a polished, smiling woman with eyes that never seemed to smile with her. From the very beginning, there had been something about her that set me on edge. She wasn't overtly cruel or rude, but there was a distinct coldness there, a transactional way of viewing the world, of evaluating everything in terms of its monetary value. I remembered the first time she came to our house for dinner. She had walked through the rooms not like a guest, but like a prospective buyer, her eyes assessing the property. She had asked, under the guise of casual conversation, how much the house was worth, how much we had in our savings accounts, whether David had good life insurance. David had noticed it too. One night, as we lay in bed, he had said to me, "Evelyn, there's something about that girl I don't like. I think she's only with Michael for what she thinks we have." I had shushed him, told him he was being paranoid, that he was just being an overprotective father. But he had been right. David was always a good judge of character. I should have listened. After David died, Jessica's subtlety vanished. She became bolder, more direct with her questions about money, more insistent that I should sell the house, move somewhere smaller, and invest the proceeds. And Michael, my own son, began to echo her words, their voices blending into a single pragmatic chorus. It was as if I was no longer his mother, but a joint project they needed to manage. The hours ticked by slowly. Every time I heard a car pass on the street, my body tensed, but it was never him. Not yet. At 4:30, my phone vibrated. A message from Michael. "I'm 20 minutes away. Please, Mom, we need to talk." I didn't respond. I simply stood up, smoothed down the fabric of my dress, and took a deep, steadying breath. At 10 minutes to 5, I heard it, the familiar soft purr of the engine. My car, my silver car, was pulling into the driveway. I watched from the living room window. Michael was behind the wheel. He looked pale and exhausted. Jessica was not with him. Interesting. Perhaps he had dropped her off somewhere, or perhaps she hadn't wanted to face the consequences of their joint venture. He turned off the engine and just sat there for a long moment. I could see his silhouette from the window. He had his head buried in his hands. Then he reached over to the passenger seat and picked up the manila envelope, the documents. Finally, he got out of the car and walked toward the front door. Each step seemed heavy, laden with the weight of his transgression. He rang the doorbell. He didn't use his key. A small gesture, but a telling one. It was a gesture of either respect or fear. I waited a few seconds before opening the door. I wanted him to stand there and feel the uncertainty. When I finally pulled the door open, our eyes met. His were red and puffy. He had been crying. Good, I thought with a cold part of my heart. Now he knows how it feels. "Mom," he began, his voice choked and hoarse. I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Inside," I said, my voice as cold and hard as steel. "Not out here for the neighbors to see." He nodded meekly and walked past me into the house. He was clutching the manila envelope in one hand and my car keys in the other. We walked in silence to the living room. I pointed to the sofa. "Sit." He obeyed like a chastened child. I sat in the armchair opposite him, the same room where I had wept in despair only hours before. But I was a different woman now. Now I was in control. Michael placed the envelope and the keys on the coffee table that separated us, as if they were offerings. I read everything," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "Mom, I didn't know. I didn't know that you had all this prepared." I crossed my arms. "And how does that change anything, Michael? Does the fact that you didn't think you'd get caught make what you did okay?" He shook his head frantically. No, of course not. What I did was wrong. It was despicable. I know that." "Then tell me," I said, leaning forward slightly. "Tell me exactly what was wrong. I want to hear you say it." He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. I took your car without your permission. That was theft." And I said horrible things to you. Unforgivable things. About the retirement community. I don't know what I was thinking." "You weren't thinking," I interrupted him sharply. "Or rather, you were. You were thinking that your mother was a stupid old woman you could manipulate, that you could bully her and treat her like she was disposable." Michael began to cry openly now, ugly, ragged sobs shaking his body. "No, Mom, no, I love you. You're my mother. It's just," Jessica said. He stopped abruptly, realizing his mistake. "Ah," I said, leaning back in my chair, a bitter taste in my mouth. "So it was Jessica's idea, of course. It's always Jessica's idea, isn't it, Michael? And what are you? A 42-year-old man who can't make his own decisions? Who lets his wife pull his strings like a puppet?" Michael raised his head, a flash of defiance in his tear-filled eyes. "That's not true, Mom. I make my own decisions." "Then why did you do this?" I pressed, my voice unyielding. "Why did you come to my house, take my keys, and tell me I should be put away in a home? Those were your words, Michael. They came out of your mouth. Not Jessica's, yours." He wiped the tears from his face with the back of his hand. You're right. You're completely right. I have no excuse. I can only tell you that I am so sorry, that I made a terrible mistake, and that it will never, ever happen again. I stood up and walked to the window. From there, I could see my silver car in the driveway, my symbol of freedom that I had so nearly lost. A mistake, I repeated, my back to him. You call this a mistake? Mistakes are accidental, Michael. Spilling a glass of milk is a mistake. Forgetting a birthday is a mistake. What you did was deliberate. It was planned. You came here with the intention of taking something that was mine. I turned to face him, my eyes blazing. And not just the car. You wanted to take my dignity, my independence, my right to live my own life. You wanted to lock me away in a retirement home as if I were a piece of old, inconvenient furniture you wanted to get rid of. Mom, please, he begged, his voice cracking. Let me make it up to you. Let me fix this. I'll do anything, 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 I repeated slowly. All right then, answer me this. Where is Jessica now? Michael lowered his gaze to the floor. I left her at her parents' house. When she read the documents with me, when she saw that you could put me in jail, that you had changed the will, she got very angry. She said I was an idiot, that I had ruined everything. Ah, I said, nodding slowly. So she's not upset because you hurt your mother. She's upset because she lost the chance to inherit my money. Michael didn't answer, but his guilty silence screamed the truth. I walked back to my chair and sat down. I need you to understand something, Michael. I raised you for the most part alone. Your father worked 16-hour shifts to give us a decent life. So it was me who fed you, who changed your diapers, who woke up in the middle of the night when you had nightmares. It was me who went to every single one of your school plays, who helped you with your homework, who defended you when the other kids bullied you. My voice wavered for a moment, but I pushed on. I worked 2 jobs for years so you could go to a good college, so you would have new clothes every season, so you wouldn't want for anything. And when you decided you wanted to study music, even though your father and I thought it was impractical, I supported you. I sold jewelry my own mother had left me to pay for your classes. Because that is what mothers do. They sacrifice everything for their children. Michael was sobbing uncontrollably now. I know, Mom, I know. And I've never thanked you enough. I've been a terrible son. And when your father died, I continued, my voice gaining strength. When I was utterly devastated, barely functioning, trying to figure out how to go on living without the love of my life. Where were you, Michael? You came to the funeral. You stayed for 2 days. And then you went back to your life. You left me alone in this empty house with my grief and my memories. That's not fair, he protested weakly. I had to work. I had responsibilities. Everyone has responsibilities, Michael. But when the people you love are in crisis, you find a way. I didn't expect you to drop your life for me. I only expected a little compassion, a little consideration, a phone call once in a while to ask how I was doing. But no, I heard almost nothing from you for 3 months until I called to tell you about my new car. And instead of being happy for me, you came to steal it. He covered his face with his hands. I'm a monster, a complete monster. You are not a monster, I told him, my voice softening slightly. You are a man who made a series of very bad decisions. A man who allowed himself to be influenced by the wrong person. A man who forgot where he came from. But you can change, if you truly want to. Michael looked up, a desperate hope in his eyes. I do want to. I swear, Mom, I want to change. Tell me what I have to do. First, I said, my voice firm again, you need to decide what is more important to you. Your wife or your mother? Because let me make something crystal clear. As long as you are with Jessica, as long as she has that corrosive influence over you, I cannot trust you. I cannot have you in my life, knowing that every word you say to me, every action you take, is being filtered through her greed. You can't ask me to do that, Michael whispered. She's my wife. I love her. You love her? I repeated. But you say you love me, and yet you did this to me. Perhaps your concept of love is distorted, Michael. Maybe you need to rethink what it really means to love someone. Because love isn't about taking. It's about giving. It's about respecting. It's about protecting. And you did none of that today. I stood up and picked up the manila envelope from the table. These documents are still valid. The new will is still in effect. The police report for grand theft auto can be filed at any time within the next year. For now, I am not going to do anything, but you will consider this a sword hanging over your head. A constant reminder that your actions have consequences. Michael stood up as well. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for not calling the police. Thank you for giving me another chance. Don't thank me yet, I told him, because this is your only chance. If you ever disrespect me again, if you ever treat me like I am less than a person, if you ever try to manipulate or control me in any way, I will use these documents. And I won't just remove you from my will, I will hold you legally accountable for what you did today. He nodded repeatedly, his eyes wide. I understand. I promise it will never happen again. There's one more thing, I added. I want you to go to therapy. You alone, not couples counseling, individual therapy. You need to understand why you allowed this to happen, why you let Jessica convince you to treat your own mother this way. You need to work on yourself before you can be a good son again. I'll do it, he said without hesitation. I'll find a therapist tomorrow. Good, I replied. And until you have been to at least 6 sessions, until I can see a real, tangible change in you, our relationship will be limited. Occasional phone calls, nothing more. You are not welcome in this house. Not until I can trust that you aren't mentally appraising every object I own. Michael took a step closer, as if to hug me, but I took a step back. Not yet, I said. I need time. I need to heal from what you did to me. And you need to prove to me with actions, not with words, that you have changed. He dropped his arms to his sides, his shoulders slumping. I understand. I'll wait as long as you need. I picked up my keys from the table, their familiar weight a comfort in my hand. These are mine. This car is mine. This house is mine. My life is mine. And nobody, I said, looking him directly in the eye, hear me well. Nobody is going to take any of that away from me ever again. Michael nodded. You're right. And I am so sorry I ever made you feel like you had to defend yourself from your own son. That should never have happened. I walked to the front door and opened it. I think it's time for you to leave. Michael walked past me. At the threshold, he stopped and turned. Mom, I really do love you. You know that, right? I looked at him, my heart aching with a complex mix of love and pain. I want to believe that. But love without respect isn't love, Michael. It's just a pretty word people use to justify their bad behavior. Show me respect. Show me that you value who I am. And maybe, with time, we can start to rebuild what was broken today. He walked out of the house. I watched him walk down the driveway to the street where a taxi was waiting, something he must have called on his drive back. Jessica had obviously kept their car. He got into the taxi, and before it pulled away, he looked back at me one last time through the window. His face was a mask of pain and regret. A part of me wanted to run to him, to hold him, to tell him everything was all right. Because that's what mothers do, isn't it? They forgive. They always forgive. But I had forgiven too many things in my life. I had forgiven Jessica's subtle digs, Michael's neglect after his father's death. And all that forgiveness had only taught them that they could keep pushing, that I would always be there to absorb the blows without complaint. But not anymore. This version of Evelyn was different. This version knew how to build walls. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against the cool wood for a moment. My whole body was trembling, not from fear or sadness, but from pure, unadulterated adrenaline. I had just confronted my son. I had just set boundaries I never in a million years thought I would have to set with my own child. And although it hurt, although every maternal fiber in my body screamed at me to be softer, I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I had done the right thing. I walked to the kitchen and poured another glass of water, my hands still shaking slightly. I looked at the clock. It was barely 6 in the evening. It felt as though an entire lifetime had passed since Michael had arrived that morning and taken my keys. A few short hours that had changed everything. I picked up my phone and called Robert. I needed to tell him what had happened. He answered immediately. Evelyn, tell me you're all right. I'm fine, I replied, a small smile touching my lips. Better than I expected, actually. Michael returned the car. We talked. I set my boundaries, and he accepted everything. Robert let out a sigh of relief that was audible even through the phone. I'm glad to hear that. You did exactly what you had to do. It must have been incredibly difficult. It was, I admitted. But it was also necessary. And you know what's strange? I feel stronger now. Like I finally reclaimed something I didn't even realize I had lost. That's called dignity, Evelyn, Robert said softly. And you deserve to feel it. We talked for a few more minutes. He assured me the documents were still valid, that I still held all the legal power, and that if I ever needed anything at all, I just had to call. Thank you, Robert. Not just for the legal help, but for believing in me. Always, Evelyn. Always. After hanging up, I stood in the middle of my quiet kitchen, suddenly unsure of what to do next. The house was too silent. All day, I had been so focused on the confrontation, on preparing myself to face Michael, that I hadn't thought about what would come after. And now, in that silence, the reality began to sink in. My son had betrayed me. That fact wasn't going to change. We might eventually rebuild our relationship, but it would never be the same. The innocence, the blind, unwavering trust a mother has in her child, had been irrevocably broken. And although I had won the battle, although I had successfully defended my dignity, I couldn't deny that I had also lost something profound. I had lost the beautiful, idealized image I held of my family. I had lost the comforting illusion that no matter what, my son would always have my back. I sat down at the kitchen table, and for the first time in hours, I allowed myself to cry again. But these were different tears. They were not the hot tears of humiliation and desperation from that morning. They were tears of grief. I was mourning the relationship I thought I had with my son. I was mourning the family I thought we were. I was mourning the mother I used to be, the one who always forgave, always understood, always put herself last, because she believed that was the definition of love. I cried for a long time, and when I finally wiped my eyes, I felt strangely peaceful, because in that act of grieving, I was also letting something go. I was releasing the unrealistic expectations, the desperate need to be the perfect mother, the crushing belief that if I was just good enough, loving enough, sacrificial enough, then my son would value me. I understood now that his choices were not my responsibility. I had done my job. I had raised him well. I had given him love and values and a solid foundation. If he chose to disregard all of that, if he chose to let Jessica mold him into someone I didn't recognize, that was his decision, not my failure. I got up and washed my face. Then I went to my bedroom and pulled a box from the top of my closet, a box I had been avoiding since David died. It was filled with letters he had written to me over our 40 years together, on birthdays, anniversaries, or sometimes for no reason at all. David wasn't a man of many words, but on paper, he was a poet. In those letters, he always reminded me of how strong I was, how capable, how valuable he found me. I pulled one out at random. The paper was soft with age. His familiar, strong handwriting filled the page. It said, "My dearest Evelyn, sometimes I see you doubt yourself, and it breaks my heart. Because I see what you don't. I see a woman who can handle anything life throws at her, who faces every problem with grace and determination, who never, ever gives up. You are so much stronger than you think. And the day you finally believe it too, the whole world is going to shake. I love you today and always, David." I held the letter to my chest, the paper absorbing a fresh tear. "I wish you were here," I whispered to the empty room. "I wish you could see me now. I think I'm finally becoming the woman you always saw in me." That night, I slept better than I had in months. I slept deeply and dreamlessly, and when I woke the next morning, the first rays of sun were streaming through my window, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt a genuine sense of hope for the future. I got up, showered, and dressed in comfortable clothes. I walked outside into the crisp morning air. My silver car was waiting in the driveway. I looked at it with affection. It had already been on such a journey, bought with hope, stolen with cruelty, and recovered with justice. But there it was, shining under the morning sun, ready to take me wherever I wanted to go. I got in, adjusted the rearview mirror, and started the engine. The soft purr was the sweetest sound. I opened the glove compartment. The manila envelope was gone. I had put it in a safe place inside the house. But now, in its place, was something different. A small, framed photo of David and me, taken on our last anniversary. Both of us smiling, our arms around each other, happy. I had put it there as a reminder, A reminder that I had known true love, that I had been cherished, and that I deserved to continue being cherished, especially by myself. I backed out of the driveway and just started driving, with no particular destination in mind. I just wanted to feel the freedom of the open road. I drove through the familiar streets of my neighborhood, then took the highway leading out of the city. The scenery began to change, houses giving way to trees, trees to wide open fields. I kept driving, the windows cracked open, the wind tangling my hair. After an hour, I found myself on the road to the cemetery where David was buried. I hadn't planned to come here, but my hands seemed to have steered me in this direction on their own, as if a part of me knew I needed to close this chapter, to tell him everything that had happened. I parked the car and walked to his grave. The headstone was simple and elegant. His name, his dates, and a phrase I had chosen. He loved with his whole heart and lived with his whole soul. I knelt on the soft grass and traced the engraved letters with my fingers. "Hello, my love," I whispered. "I'm sorry I haven't been to visit sooner. It's been a difficult few days." And then, kneeling there in the quiet solitude, I told him everything. I told him about buying the car, about Michael and Jessica, about the betrayal, the documents, the confrontation. I talked and talked, and though I know it sounds foolish to talk to a stone, I swear I could feel his presence, his unwavering approval. "I did what you always told me to do," I said finally, my voice thick. "I didn't let them walk all over me. I stood up for my dignity. And it hurts, my love, it hurts so much that it was our son. But I also feel good, I feel strong. I feel like the woman you always said I was." I stayed there for almost an hour, just sitting in the peaceful silence, feeling the connection to the man who had been my partner for 40 years. When I finally stood up to leave, I felt as if a great weight had been lifted. I felt as if he had given me his blessing to move on, to be strong, to finally put myself first. I drove back home, feeling lighter. But as I pulled onto my street, I saw a car parked in front of my house, a red sedan I didn't recognize, and then I saw who was sitting on the steps of my front porch, waiting for me. It was Jessica, and from the thunderous expression on her face, she had not come to apologize. I parked my car and took a moment to compose myself. I hadn't expected this. I thought that after Michael's retreat, Jessica would keep her distance. Clearly, I had underestimated her audacity. I took a deep breath, grabbed my purse, and got out of the car. Jessica stood up as I approached. She was dressed impeccably as always, but her eyes were cold and hard as chips of ice. "Jessica," I said, my voice neutral. "I wasn't expecting you." "We need to talk," she replied, her voice tight and controlled. "About what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She crossed her arms. "About what you did to Michael. About how you threatened to put your own son in jail over a simple misunderstanding. About how you changed your will just to punish us." "A misunderstanding?" I repeated slowly, the words tasting like poison. "Is that what you call grand theft auto and emotional abuse? A misunderstanding?" Jessica let out a derisive snort. "Oh, please, Evelyn. He's your son. It wasn't theft. He was borrowing the car, and you turned it into this huge, pathetic drama. You called a lawyer. You drew up legal documents. You threatened him with the police, all for a stupid car." "It was never just about the car," I said, feeling the cold rage from the day before begin to simmer again. "It was about respect. It was about the fact that my son, at your urging, walked into my house, took my property, and told me I was no longer fit to live my own life. That I should be put in a home." Jessica waved a dismissive hand. "He was stressed. He said things he didn't mean. We all do." "Oh, really?" I said, taking a step closer. "So when you're stressed, you also tell your own mother she should go rot in a nursing home, because if so, maybe you're the one who needs professional help." "Don't you dare judge me," she spat, pointing a finger at my face. "You know nothing about our lives, about our problems. Michael and I are having financial difficulties. We needed that car for the trip. My parents were going to help us out, but we had to get there first. And you selfishly refused to help your own family." I laughed. It was a bitter, hollow sound. Selfishly? I was selfish for not letting you steal from me? The car I bought with my own money, money my husband made sure I had so I would be secure, Tell me, Jessica, in what universe is it selfish to protect what is yours? Her lips thinned into a hard line. You're his mother. You're supposed to help him, not threaten him with jail. I helped him for 42 years, I shot back, my voice rising. I fed him, clothed him, educated him. I sacrificed my own needs so he could have everything. But that's not enough for you, is it? You want me to keep sacrificing until there's nothing left of me, until I'm just an empty old woman with no rights and no dignity, and you have control of my bank accounts. You're being dramatic, she said, rolling her eyes. No one's asking for that. We're just asking you to be reasonable, to share what you have with your only son. Share, I repeated. Then where were you when my husband died? Where were you both when I was completely broken? You stayed for 2 days, then disappeared for 3 months. Because you have your own lives, your own responsibilities, right? Exactly, she said, falling into my trap. And I respect that, I said. But now that I am trying to rebuild my own life, to find a sliver of happiness after losing the love of my existence, you show up demanding I hand everything over to you. My car, my house, my money. It's always about what you can get from me. Jessica's face contorted with fury. You know what your problem is, Evelyn. You're bitter. You're a lonely, resentful old woman, and because your husband is gone, you want everyone else to be miserable too. That's why you're pushing Michael away. That's why you changed the will. Because if you can't be happy, you're going to make damn sure no one else can be either. Her words were meant to wound, to cut me to the core. But instead, they brought a moment of absolute clarity. She wasn't here for Michael. She wasn't here to mend fences. She was here because of the inheritance she had just lost. And finally, after 5 years of biting my tongue for my son's sake, I saw her for exactly who she was. Get off my property, I said, my voice dangerously calm. Jessica blinked. What? I said, I repeated, enunciating each word. Get off my property, now. She let out a laugh of disbelief. I'm not leaving until we sort this out like adults. We have sorted it out, I replied. And I've heard enough. Now leave before I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. You wouldn't dare, she scoffed, but a flicker of uncertainty entered her eyes. After yesterday? After you saw that I am not the weak, compliant woman you thought I was, you still want to underestimate me? Go ahead. Try me. I pulled my phone from my purse. Jessica's eyes darted from my face to the phone and back again. You're crazy, she muttered. Completely insane. Maybe, I said. Or maybe I'm finally sane after years of letting people like you walk all over me. Now go. Jessica stared at me for another long second, her face a mask of pure hatred. This isn't over, she threatened. Michael is my husband, and I will make sure he understands that he has to choose. It's either his crazy, manipulative mother or his real family. Go ahead, I said, my voice steady. Make him choose, because something tells me that when Michael really thinks about who has been there for him his entire life and who only showed up when there was something to be gained, the decision is going to be easier than you think. With a final, venomous glare, Jessica spun on her heel and stormed back to her car. She slammed the door, revved the engine with unnecessary force, and peeled out of my driveway, leaving the smell of burning rubber in the air. I stood there, watching her go, my heart hammering against my ribs. But it wasn't from fear. It was the exhilarating rush of adrenaline. I had just stood up to Jessica. I had told her exactly what I thought, without apology, without trying to keep the peace at any cost. And it felt incredible. It felt like breathing after being held underwater for 5 long years. I walked back into my house, locked the door, and then I did something unexpected. I laughed, a deep, cathartic laugh of pure relief and liberation. For 5 years, I had walked on eggshells around that woman, ignoring her insults, pretending not to see her avarice, all for the sake of a fragile, illusory family harmony. But I realized now that by tolerating her disrespect, I hadn't helped Michael. I had enabled him. I had taught him that it was acceptable for his wife to treat his mother with contempt. I had contributed to the toxic dynamic that had culminated in the most painful day of my life. That night, I made a decision. No more. No more putting others' comfort before my own dignity. No more sacrificing myself for the illusion of peace. If Michael truly wanted to rebuild our relationship, it would be on my terms, with mutual respect, with clear, unshakable boundaries. And if that meant our relationship would never be the same, then so be it. Because the relationship we'd had before was already broken. The following days were quiet. I didn't hear from Michael. A part of me, the motherly part, worried that Jessica had carried out her threat and forced him to choose her. The thought was painful, but I also knew that if he chose a woman who so clearly despised me, then there was nothing more I could do. The rest was up to him. I decided to focus on myself. I called my friend Sarah, and over the phone I told her everything. She didn't judge. She didn't utter any platitudes about family being family. She was unequivocally on my side. "Evelyn," she said, her voice filled with pride, "I am so damn proud of you. You did the right thing." We met for lunch the next day. It was the first time I'd socialized in months. "You look different," she said as she hugged me. "Stronger." "I feel it," I replied. Over salads, Sarah, who had been widowed for 5 years, shared her own journey. "Our husbands loved us, Evelyn," she said, taking my hand. "The last thing they would want is for us to live like ghosts. David would want you to live." She was right. He had made me promise. "So," Sarah said, her eyes twinkling, "what are you going to do with all this newfound freedom?" The question caught me off guard. I don't know," I admitted. "What's something you always wanted to do but never did?" she pressed. I thought for a moment. I always wanted to see the ocean at sunrise. David and I always talked about it, but we ran out of time. "Perfect," Sarah declared. "Then that's what you're going to do. You're going to drive to the coast, and you're going to watch the sunrise for you." The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. A 5-hour drive, a motel room, all by myself. But I knew she was right. I needed to prove to myself that I could. "I'm going to do it," I said, the decision solidifying as I spoke the words. "This weekend." When I got home, there was a message from Michael. "Mom, I know you need space, but I wanted you to know I found a therapist. I had my first session. It was hard. I'm working on myself. I'm trying to understand how I let things get so far. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm trying. I love you." I read the message several times. I wanted to reply, to encourage him. But the wiser part of me, the newly cautious part, knew that actions, sustained over time, were what mattered now. So I put the phone away and started planning my trip. I found a small, cozy motel online with an ocean view and booked a room for Friday night. I was going to spend money on myself, without an ounce of guilt. On Friday morning, I packed a small bag, my old camera, and my husband's book of poetry. I loaded them into my silver car. This wasn't just a trip, it was a pilgrimage. I pulled out of my driveway as the sun was beginning to rise, a new day for a new life. The 5-hour drive flew by. I listened to old songs on the radio, and instead of crying, I smiled, feeling David's memory not as a weight, but as a warm presence beside me. I arrived at the motel in the afternoon. My room was perfect. I opened. The door to the balcony and the smell of salt and sea filled my lungs. The view was breathtaking, an endless expanse of blue, meeting the sky at the horizon. I felt a sense of peace settle over me, a peace I hadn't felt in years. That night, I had dinner alone at a seaside restaurant. I walked along the beach under a full moon, the sound of the waves a soothing lullaby. I felt complete, not lonely. I set my alarm for 5 a.m. and woke before it rang. I dressed warmly, grabbed my camera, and walked out onto the deserted beach. I sat on the cool sand and waited. And then, slowly, majestically, the sky began to transform. From deep indigo to pale lavender, then to fiery streaks of pink and orange. Finally, the sun breached the horizon, a brilliant ball of fire that set the water ablaze with light. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Tears streamed down my face, tears of pure, unadulterated joy. For being alive, for having the strength to get here, for this new beginning. I stayed there until the sun was high in the sky. Then I took out my phone. Michael had sent another message the night before. Third therapy session. We're working on how I let money and Jessica's opinions become more important than you. I'm still working. I'm still trying. I looked at his message, then at the magnificent ocean before me. And I began to type. Michael, I am at the coast. I came to see the sunrise. Something your father and I always wanted to do. I did it alone. And as I watched the sun come up, I realized something. I forgive you. Not because what you did was okay, but because holding on to that rage only hurts me. But you need to understand, forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. Our relationship has changed. If we want to rebuild it, it will take time, a lot of time, and it will require you to prove with your actions that you have truly changed. In the meantime, I am going to live my life. I am going to be happy, because I deserve it. I love you, but now I also love myself, and that is something I will never negotiate again. I pressed send and felt a final heavy weight lift from my soul. I didn't know what the future held for Michael and me, but I knew I would be okay. I had found my strength. I had reclaimed my life. And as I started the long drive home, my silver car humming beneath me, I knew this wasn't the end of my story. This was just the beginning of a brand new chapter, one where I was the one holding the pen,